Hello and a very warm welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with me. I'm your host, Rosie Gill-Moss, and joining me today from across the channel, I've got Kassie McCleeary, all the way from, well, all the way, it's not that far, is it? I'm only in Kent, but from Paris. Welcome, Kassie.
Thank you.
How are you today?
Doing all right.
Yeah?
Yeah. Pretty.
So for our listeners, Kassie and I have just had a little chat before the microphones went on. And Kassie, I think you might be my most recent widow to date because your John died in January this year. So you are pretty fresh.
Very much so. But it was a long journey to get there. So.
Yeah, and it was a cancer death as well. And one of the things I noticed in your application form was he died from lung cancer at 35 and he wasn't a smoker, because that must be the first question everybody asks you.
Yeah. So he was 34 and he was diagnosed and then died at 37. No, not. He always did lots of sports. We would actually leave parties if people were smoking because he'd get so annoyed with the air and whatnot. And so we still just kind of sort of random freak coincidence that lung cancer happened that young.
If you're going to win a lottery, that's not the one you want to win, is it?
No, that's not why we want to be well known, because the whole French medical system was aware of the case because it was such an oddity to have someone in that age range without any smoking. Yeah. So the whole is
me.
Yeah.
So you had quite a I suppose like quite a romantic start. You're American and you guys met in France and you now live in France. So I think what would be really interesting for me and for our listeners would be to kind of get to take you back and tell me a little bit about the kind of romance and the love, because you're here to talk about him dying, of course you are, but I feel with so many of my guests, in fact all of my guests, there's so much more to their story than the death. So I guess when you're ready in your own time, I'll kind of prompt you if you need, but just go back and tell me a little bit about how you guys met and what your lives looked like prior to the diagnosis.
Yeah. So we met in 2010. I had come to Nantes, France, which was part of an exchange program with my school in the United States. I was studying French, so I was excited to go learn the language, visit the culture. It was my first time in Europe. And I didn't really have the goal of meeting a French boyfriend, but my first week at school, there was this French guy who came in to tell us he played American football, and we wanted to watch football games together, which was the last thing any French student really wants because they're all quite into culture and art, or like to think they are in the US.
Cheese.
Yeah, and it's like 60 girls for 5 guys. So, and John knew this, so he was more, I think, shopping around to see who would want to go out. So he exchanged phone numbers with one of the guy friends of mine who actually did like American football, and called him our first weekend out and said, "Hey, let's hang out." And my friend thought it was a bit weird that this French guy was calling us. I was like, whatever. We know him through our study abroad program. We have his phone number, his address. If he's weird, we'll just walk home. We live next to each other, so we'll just whatever. And well, I guess it wasn't that weird because we started hanging out through my whole study abroad, and which was a really great model because he had a whole team of American football players who were French. I had a whole bunch of women who knew girls who were ready to meet French men, and kind of everyone was there for 4 months, so no one really wanted anything serious. So we just had a ton of sort of fun running around Paris, we went to Paris too. Just sort of, I guess,
now forgive my ignorance, and I could Google this, but seeing as I've got you here, where is Nantes in France?
So it's the west, it's about a 2-hour train ride from Paris, but it's towards the west. I call it the armpit because it's the Brittany post out and it's just underneath there. So it's in the northern part, closer to the coast.
I should know. Ben's business is based in France. We spent a lot of time in France, but it was very much sort of Brittany-Normandy border, that sort of area.
So we're going to be the southern part of Brittany, close to the southern part.
Anyway, I digress with my geography lesson here. I just, I thought if I don't know, other people won't know as well. So.
No, it's, so we were just hung out and I did an internship over the summer. And so we were, I guess, together for 8 months, and then I had to go back home to finish school. And so I did. So we did long distance, for about a year, and then I did international relations, always wanted to go live abroad. So I came back to Nantes as a teaching assistant in 2011, and we just hung out had, I was teaching, he was working, had a fun time there, just sort of being a young couple. And then we moved to Canada for his job. We're in Montreal, where I did a grad school program. We had a whole nother sort of phase of our life that happened there, and a whole group of friends. And both of us sort of moved forward professionally or academically in a really great way. And that's where we got married in Quebec City, because the consulate was too packed in Montreal because there's so many French people there. And we left in 2016, and then we came back to Paris and was living in Paris. We've been living in Paris since then. Came back originally for his job again, but then we just sort of got into a nice, some people, Paris is a great city. I think there's a reason people love to visit. So it's sort of we're in a great neighborhood where there's lots of a market right close by, lots of restaurants, lots of bars, and John was very gifted at becoming friends with all the barmen and the restaurant owners, and is really into wine. So we'd go in and he'd have a quick conversation, and I was just sort of the American wife sidekick who people would remember because it was a little bit out of the normal. So really just had a great number of years that were kind of just being a young couple, meeting friends. Paris has a lot of international people, so there's lots of other sort of dual nationality couples hanging out. There's a lot of, I guess, steps to our relationship, but that was sort of a young, carefree one, especially looking
like
back
the
now.
halcyon days.
Yes, and it was fun, and I was getting some of my first jobs out of grad school and trying to sort of conquer the whole French job market, which isn't easy as a foreigner because they really like people to fit into boxes, and I don't. So challenging, but also quite rewarding. And then we get into, I guess, in 2020. Well, the world stopped for a lot of people, but I guess for us it was sort of a similar challenging phase.
As soon as you say 2020, is that your alarm going off?
I don't know why.
Yeah, sorry. As long as because it could be something in the studio. I'd much prefer it to be something your end.
It was a toy timer that my daughter set this morning.
I'd set my alarm to come on mic today and then left my phone in the garden, so it'd just been binging for 5 minutes. Anyway, well, as soon as you said 2020. My heart kind of drops because I speak to a lot of people in this job, and for a lot of people whose partners were diagnosed or became ill in 2020, the process was very delayed, and it means that outcomes perhaps wouldn't have necessarily been so tragic. Now, I don't know whether that is something that affects you, but I guess tell me a little bit about what that was like, because being locked down in Paris, suddenly this kind of cosmopolitan city must have felt far less free.
Yes, I think I'm a bit of a trooper and was kind of like, everyone just pay attention, do what we're told, and this will be done quick. Of course,
head down, get on with it kind of thing. Yeah.
It's not a group, no one likes this, but we gotta
and is
do
that
it.
when John started to develop some symptoms? Is that when he started?
It would have been later. So 2020 was kind of, I guess, crappy for a lot of other reasons. The cancer was 2021. So 2020, I was still refreshed to be in a city that was from my window, I could see people, even if they were masked, I could still see people going about their daily lives, which I'm more of an extrovert. So when I'm isolated or in the countryside for a week, it's lovely. But then longer, I'm like, what's going on? I don't have any reference. So I think I was actually quite, it was okay. And then we had neighbors move in a month before COVID. That was another French-American couple that was our age. So we didn't see anyone else besides them, but we'd have we'd our cave in the basement. We'd go get wine. We had these great dinners together so we kind of just potted together with them and got to know them really well. So that the first part was actually it was unusual and abstract and kind of crazy, but looking back right now, I would rather relive that 1,000 times compared to what came afterwards. Who wants to relive? And again, I was in a situation where I had a job that I could do remotely and easily, so didn't have any stress financially there, and people were following rules, and the government was taking things seriously I'm kind of saying this in reference to family in the United States, where it was a
Was it a little
rodeo
bit
and
less?
like people were genuinely scared because rules weren't being followed or put in place. So it was quite, I guess, a comfortable place to be in during COVID.
Yeah.
But then my mom got diagnosed with cancer in the fall. There was a lot of family drama with my husband's family and his parents divorcing. And then just still happening. So it's a bit of a
And actually, you mentioned to
bubble.
me before we sort of officially came on
Yep.
microphone that your husband's brother died very suddenly that Christmas.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I sort of said, you don't say anymore because I want to ask you this on mic. So pretend
Yeah.
you've told me nothing and just tell me
I've
a
told
little
you
bit about
nothing.
that if
Yes.
you may. You've told
So
me nothing.
then
I know nothing.
we've had this year that's already been rather exceptional. My mom is diagnosed and I'm far away and I can't see her, which is
That
really
must be
hard.
horrible. How is your mum now? Dare I
She's great.
ask?
That was like, she caught it super early, super, super early. She was just, she's always been someone who's very like, get all your checkups, because my grandpa died from a cancer that could have been prevented had he just reacted to what he was feeling. So that went really well. And then after she had her surgery for cancer, like I had found out I was pregnant. So it was okay. It's been a bit of a struggle, but on the way up, positive things to come. And then my brother-in-law on Christmas Eve passed away from, we still don't know. Just his heart just stopped. So got a call from his girlfriend that he hadn't arrived on the 24th because we were in Nantes and he was going to go spend Christmas Eve with her family. And it was unusual that he would just not show up and wasn't responding to his phone. So I was home prepping food and whatnot. And my husband and his mom went to his apartment. Fortunately, they didn't have keys, so they couldn't go in, but I ended up calling the fire department because we thought it was weird that we could hear his phone ringing from the outside. The lights were on, like, okay, this is unusual. And I mean, the firemen they know what they're doing, so they make sure you stay outside. But he had just died, so we still don't know. It was awful.
Gosh,
And we
terrible. And
had
you've
Christmas
just found out
presents
you're
for him,
pregnant.
and I just found, and we were at like 3 months, and we just gotten sort of the go that everything was okay, and we could start sharing and be happy about it and excited, and like we didn't even
Awful
get to that because we
tragedy.
were telling people about Alexi, so it was quite the
Isn't it?
roller coaster of a year, and it was just such a shock. And now that we've had my husband's death, which was a much longer death, so unfortunately we now have lived both the
Both.
shocking surprise and the kind of one where you know
It's
what's
a
going to happen.
huge amount to happen in one family, and
Yeah,
like you say, COVID has been quite comfortable for you guys, and actually
that
perhaps
was
just, and then to kind of get through relatively unscathed, because anybody that got through 2020 unscathed, you feel like you've kind of come through
right.
like a real war zone almost, and to have this happen right at the end, and talk about inconvenient as well. Christmas Eve, like that's going to ruin all your Christmases.
Well, we've been okay with kind of, but it's there. And then his brother's birthday was November 1st, so it's All Saints Day, so it's these like really important dates that you can't go past. I think the first is just hard because we had gifts wrapped for him. So like, what do
Yeah,
you do with them? And during COVID, you
yeah.
weren't allowed to have, like, it's a young person who you can't have more than 30 people in the funeral space.
Oh,
So everyone had big masks and like had to distance, and like it was such a shock that people were still like, it was, I mean, that was, I think, similar to a lot of people who lived through other COVID deaths.
it felt incredibly
It's
cruel and scary, and I think we were all almost preparing that we might lose people to COVID, but when anything happened that was seemingly unrelated, it felt like even more of a big shock,
it
because
yeah. Well, and
yeah,
he was 30, like, so
yeah.
it was he 31? No, 30. No,
Don't
he would
worry,
have
I
been,
won't. I won't check.
yeah, whatever, around there. He was born in 1990, but that's, so it was like, just, and again, we still don't know. They're studying, like doing some pretty intensive DNA testing for both my husband and him, because it was and I remember thinking when he passed, I was like, well, that's awful, but like there's no way that two brothers in the same family have some crazy early death, and like never say that. And this was the
No,
same time also my mom had her last radiation treatment for cancer like the week later, so I was like excited she was okay, but then we were feeling this. And then it was probably a couple weeks later when my husband started to have these, we can't prove it ever if there was something that sort of the trauma of losing his brother triggered something. And him and his brother got very close in the last like several years before he passed away. And when they were kids, like his brother was super artsy and kind of intellectual. My husband was more the sporty, outgoing, whatever. So they kind of like weren't like very super close as kids, but then they became close working on a family business that was not good for the rest of everything else. So the relationship with my husband and his dad was not great, but it brought the brothers together, and they had just an immense respect for each other as adults, which was great to see and amazing to see. So I think it was even harder for him after sort of gaining this adult relationship with his brother. But it was a couple weeks later where he started having this kind of pain that we thought might be kidney stones in his like abdomen. We got it checked out, nothing was happening. Then he had like this back pain that we couldn't figure out, and he was going to like an osteopath, and then he went to a podiatrist to get things in his heels because he'd broken a leg when he was younger, so one was longer. So we're like, well, maybe it's just your back is adjusting, and he was in just a ton of pain, and we were trying and couldn't get it figured out. And then he lost his voice, so he was like, but he didn't have like he wasn't sick, nothing was swollen, it was just like this weird like talking really quietly like this, like I'm like, okay, well, maybe he's just tired, like emotionally, physically, from, this sort of junk with his like dad and trying to get out of this like business that they started and his brother passing away, and just, maybe this is linked to
I was
that.
thinking an awful lot of this can be written off to stress, to grief.
Right.
And actually, when you're looking at a young person, your first thought is not, oh, you've got cancer. It is just not
now
the first.
It is for me. I'm like, you
of
have this, go
course,
get it
like,
checked out, get a scan,
your toe hurts.
get all the tests.
Yes, yes.
But for us, I was like, okay, back issues, like you were an athlete, you haven't taken care of yourself, like you haven't been doing maintenance fitness for a long time. You'll go play flag football or a game of soccer and you're not training, so you might, hurt yourself or something. But I didn't in my wildest dreams think that it would have been lung cancer, and really nothing he had was linked. None of the symptoms that we had seen were linked to
So they weren't
tumors
sort
in
of
the lungs.
traditional lung cancer symptoms.
Well, and they were all symptoms of it being in other organs, which is a bad sign in general, lung cancer, but specifically lung cancer once it leaves one of the lungs, like it's going to be a long-term. It's not ever going to be really fully healed. So we are having these kind of weird things, and this is all through me being more and more pregnant.
I was going to say you're pregnant as well. So at what point does this start to look serious? Because initially you're going to be ruling out, viral infections. COVID's probably even on your radar. Is it a weird type of COVID? And so at what point, I mean, we're dealing with a man here as well. So at what point did he seek sort of medical attention, and at what point did they say this is quite serious?
So we have a really good friend who's a doctor. He's known one of our just good longtime friends, and she was sending in for like tests and scans, and she was kind of like, look, like you need to just go. It was in May, that like we'd seen the doctor for the back, we'd seen the doctor for the different isolated things, and it was all like. It would have been, yes, because in May, I remember it was 6 weeks before your due date you have as your maternity leave starts. And I had my COVID vaccine was kicked in, and the terraces in Paris all opened up. So I was like, I'm free, no work. I just get to sit with this baby. And then, my husband needs to rest up a little bit because he's not in great shape right now. So I remember I went to go visit a friend along the beach, and kind of just with her, and then met up with my husband and our friend, and like, look, I'm out of solutions. I can't figure this out. Like, you need to just go to the hospital, go to the emergency room, because I'm I've done my whole checklist of everything, and you've seen other doctors, and we need someone to look at this globally. And if you go in, and then it was probably a week. Yeah, that was like the end of May. So it's probably a week later where my husband's, so he'd also had these like weird kind of, he went to the eye doctor because he had these kind of weird like lights like flashing in his head, and the eyes were fine. But then, yeah, it would have been like the end of May. He was having like his leg was bothering him, but then he was like losing movement in his left leg. So it was becoming like, and it was practically paralyzed. And his back, like he had no more, like he couldn't move it. He was just dragging it along. And then the next day I was gonna go, like I had a doctor's appointment and was leaving. He's like, okay, I'm at the doctor's. I'm going to check this out. And it was, I think, June 2nd or June 3rd. And they had him stay overnight, and they did the scans and of his back. And they're like, okay, there's a whole bunch of forms. They didn't get to say it was tumors, but like there's things in his lower back. And so they went further up, and they're like, and his lungs and his head. So he had tumors in his
Oh
brain and
God.
his kidneys and his lungs. So they said it might
How was the
be
poor guy
cancer.
walking? Like, I mean,
We don't know. Like, there's lots of things that were like, even at the end, the doctor's like, we don't really know how, like, he had so many tumors at the end that we don't really know how he was walking. But he walked himself to the emergency room, which is Paris. There's lots of hospitals. So I think once he got in, and I'm at this point in June, like my due date's June 30th, and this is like the beginning of the last month of pregnancy, and he gets checked into the hospital. So
you
it
must have been
was,
terrified. You must have been
it was,
absolutely terrified. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. It's made me feel quite emotional because I
yeah.
know how vulnerable we are when we're pregnant and how much you need to be looked after. And for you to have to face this piece of news whilst, thinking, and I bet you're doing the whole, I must stay calm for the baby. I must not transmit my
It
stress for the
was,
baby.
yeah. Well, and I was like, okay, and like we just kept saying, like, don't come out, stay inside. Like,
Yeah.
Daddy's at the hospital. And then everyone, I had like an amazing just community and team of people who came in who were just ready to, like my friend Kimmy, who's
SWAT team.
actually maybe still in the apartment, she's visiting this weekend, who came in while they waited for my mom to come. I had some other friends who lived a block away, who like, and then the neighbors who we knew really well at that point, who were just all like stepping in, like, what do we do? Don't lift anything. We're going, like, it was, people really rallied and very quickly.
You see the best and worst in people in these situations, and it
Yeah.
sounds like you have some good people around you, which is
Yeah.
a small consolation, but
It is.
in
I
this
mean, I think
moment, you needed it, right?
very, I mean, it was kind of just a unique, almost just like, I don't know, I feel like a mini series could be written just about that like
Oh my
month
God,
of myself
yes.
in Paris while like, and things were opening up after COVID. So people were refinding other people. But he was at the hospital, and it was, I think he was so tired and had so many things going wrong, but I think was holding it together because he had to. And then being in the hospital and finding out that there really is something wrong, I think like you could tell, it just like it was almost like he like not let go, but it was like, okay, I'm allowed to be tired, and we know. So we had that like something is really up, and I was kind of convinced that he had like a pinched nerve or a disc that was messed up, and that's why his back was hurting, and that was the paralysis. So I was like, okay, we're gonna do back surgery, and then I'm gonna have a baby, and we're all gonna be okay.
It's all going to be fine.
And that was it. But no, so it took like probably a good, like, I don't know, over to have all the tests back. It was probably a week and a half or so before, maybe even a bit longer before they could say that it was what type of lung cancer it was.
That's been excruciating that way. Was he in hospital during this time
Yeah,
or
so
home?
he was like 3 weeks in the hospital, partly because there was just so much pain meds, and then they were just
Yeah.
testing and trying and eliminating everything. So was at one hospital and was switched to one that had specialized in lung cancer and lungs. I guess also the advantage of being in a Paris is there's a ton of
Lots of
hospitals,
options.
and most of the specialists, there's a lot of research specialists who are all here. So you're getting great care, and even like the team of people who got together to look at his file was, I mean, 6 to 8 I don't know, specialists in different domains. So that was something I was always comforted with. I guess also growing up in the US, and people were like, get a second opinion. I was like, there is no second opinion here.
Yeah.
We have the best
Yeah.
in the country. If we go private, we might have a nicer room with like
That's about it, right?
prettier curtains or something, but like the actual care is not going to get better than what we've got here.
And just, I mean, I've just written down, I make a lot of notes while people are
Mhm.
talking. And just one thing, how did John take the news? Because this must have been, even though he's the one that has been feeling unwell and probably hiding a lot of how rubbish he felt, perhaps.
Yeah.
But it still must have been a massive, massive shock for him. And I'm trying not to I'm trying not to poke you too much
Yeah.
because I don't want to make you sad. But I guess I'm thinking of this guy who's got this beautiful wife who's pregnant with their first baby, and then to be told that you are probably not going to be able to see this life unfold. Is this something that he's aware of yet?
No. At that
No.
point, they don't tell you. They tell you that, this is serious.
Serious.
And once you have lung cancer, that especially has, they don't say it like they were very, very, very cautious
Very
to not give
diplomatic.
any time limits to, and he would ask, like he was a very stubborn and insistent. What about this? What about that? They're like, look, this is spread to a lot of places, but it's quite an anomaly. You're very healthy otherwise. I mean, noted when you saw like the description of like his lifestyle, like, okay, you're drinking a little bit more than maybe you should, but like,
Who isn't
whatever.
at 30 in Paris, right?
Right, right. So it's, but besides that, like you have good lungs. Most people who get diagnosed like this have crappy lungs and they're 70 old, like, so you might take better to treatment. So they didn't want to give any sort of like life sentence or anything like that. But they did say, like, look, once you have metastasized lung cancer, you might be in remission for a few years, but it's going to keep coming back. Like it doesn't ever just completely go away once it's spread. So you're already preparing yourself at that point for a life that's going to be different. But the first medicine he was on was, it was a pill with very few side effects, and it worked really, really well for the first like 5 months. So it was kind of like, okay, well, maybe like if this works, like you could, it might be more like some other long-term illnesses like multiple
We'll live with it
sclerosis
kind of
or things
thing.
like that. That like, okay, maybe this could be, I mean, automatically, I'm like, we're not going to be 80 and old together. Like this isn't, unless and then they're like, well, you never know. Cancer research is moving so fast. So maybe you had this treatment for 15 years and we find out another possibility. So it's kind of a little bit more like that. Maybe that's what we wanted to
There's
see.
still some hope here, isn't there? When I talk to the guests, and primarily you see this in a terminal illness, because with a sudden death, as you know yourself, the hope is extinguished quite quickly.
Right.
But when somebody's got this terminal illness, or this life-altering illness, as it is for you guys at the moment, you are grabbing at straws, aren't you? You're thinking that, like you say, the cancer treatment could come a long way if we can keep him going for 15 years. And I'm guessing that during this period of, you say 5 months on the meds, that your baby was born. So
yeah. So he just started, he came home from the hospital, and so I had a friend staying with me until my mom could get there because she had her last follow-up meeting after her cancer before she could come visit. And because of COVID, no one could come. Normally, no one was going to see me like pregnant for my family. So I have a twin sister as well. And so everyone was just following from abroad and excited to come in the summer after the baby was born, once some COVID restrictions were more laid back. So it was, pretty particular. But my mom was like, okay, well, as soon as I called her and like called my family and said what was going on, she's like, okay, I'm getting there as quickly as possible. Like the 21st is my appointment with I was like, well, don't miss, like, I don't want you to mess up your care because it's going well. Like, get here. And then my friend Camille was here, and I had my other really good friend Kate, who had just given birth. So we were pregnant together here in Paris, and both of us are Americans. And so I had people here. Like they all did the last like preparation courses with my midwife in case they needed to be there in the birthing room with me. And then the hospital was really flexible and said that they would drive my husband over in an ambulance if I went into labor and they needed to get him there.
That's
Yeah, so it
that's
was,
made me go all goosebumps.
I
That's
know.
really
So it was like
sweet.
the care that we received the whole time through was incredible. And the maternity that I was at, so he'd gotten home. So he came home about a week before I gave birth, and he was not in great shape, really tired. And I was like kind of even scared because of the brain tumors, has had these like mini seizures. So I was almost like stressed out that I'm like, I don't know, like I can't help you if you have a seizure. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
So we had this medicine that he would take, and he would just be completely like in the clouds. But at least he was home. And so I think that like our daughter was born 3 or 4 days late, and I think it was like I was just like, nope, stay up there, like don't come out until like we kind of
Yeah,
have a
yeah, yeah.
semblance of what's going on. So my mom had gotten there, and in the hospital it was COVID. You're only allowed to have one person, but they made exceptions so that my mom and my husband could both be there, because he was, I mean, clearly the person giving birth is the one who's the most tired, but anyone who's accompanying that, like, it's a tiring experience as well. So my mom could be there to sort of pull in be there when he needed to take a break. And then,
And was he there for the birth?
yeah, so he was
Good.
there, he came, and then I ended up being induced, because I think I was so good at telling my
Oh,
daughter
it's
to stay up
horrible.
there that it was like the first step of the soft, sort of just, they had 4 steps to inducing. They're like, we'll do the first one and see how you react, and that got things going. But so we could plan it out, which I think, okay, we're going to go to the hospital tomorrow. You're coming with me. And they were really like, normally the husbands don't get a meal, but they like
They took
somehow would
care
always
of
have
him.
one. And he was so used to his little hospital routine at that point that it was like, okay, I set up my chair like this, I turn on the soccer game, and then like I was like, okay, well, what about, aren't I the like, I'm supposed to have had a baby? But he could be there, and he, has been like basically since we'd moved to Paris had wanted to be like, was ready to be a dad. I mean, he admitted later he wasn't actually ready then, but was just waiting for me to be ready. So it was could still be there. And
And that's
even though he
something really
was,
special to tell your daughter. Sorry, I've just interrupted you. I wasn't
yeah,
looking at you. But I think for I'm a similar situation in that my youngest daughter was 6 months when my husband died. So it's things like that, the tiny little bit of time they have with them, you'll be able to say that he was there when she came into the world. That's quite a monumental moment. Oh, well,
yeah,
it's a very monumental moment, this birth of your child.
Yeah.
And I think that as she gets older, she'll be very grateful that you guys were able to facilitate that for her. So how old is she now? She must only be 4 or 5 months. So you've got a fairly newborn there.
No, well, that was 2021. So now she'll be 3 this
Oh my
summer.
God, it was. I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
No, she'll be 3. She'll be 3. Yes. So she got a couple years.
Oh, good. So you
Yes.
managed,
So
and I bet you've got plenty of photos, haven't you? I've got about 3 of
I've
Ben.
got 1,000 photos, and one of the things to figure out, like, I'm going to do albums and things. So I'm like, how many photos do I have up where it doesn't look like a shrine, but then it also like, it's her dad.
I'll
and I want her
send you
to
a
see him.
picture of my wall. It's called the Wall of Love. I've got like a corridor from my back door, and it's just it's a big tall ceiling because it's quite an old house, and it's just covered in pictures. And there's pictures before they died, like pictures of Ben and Sarah's kids, picture right up to now.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a bit kind of whoa when I first did it. But everybody that comes into my house stops and looks at the kids. Like often I'll just find them stood in the corridor just looking at the photos. I think you can never have too many.
That's it. I'm kind of like, well, for now, I'm like, well, I have all the photos that were up like before he passed away. So I'm just like, I haven't changed any. And it's not like he left, or like it was like we would have preferred to still be here. So it's, yeah, but our daughter.
Sorry, I've taken it now.
Yes,
I've taken off on an interior design tangent.
I mean, it's a valid question, because like how much, I think it depends how it's presented too. Like if it's set up like a shrine, then it looks like a shrine.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. And I was very, very conscious. I didn't want that.
Right.
Sort of, I wanted it to him to just kind of be entwined into our lives. So the pictures just to be up, like not to have this kind of Ben section, but just to have pictures dotted around, because actually it's all those kids have got, isn't it? They don't have these solid core memories that we do. And I got a video of Tabby at about, I don't know, but not even a year, looking at a picture and, that's daddy. And I really like that she's got this awareness. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. So take me back now. So you just had your baby. Are you happy to share her name? What's her name?
Her name is Constance, and
nice.
we call her Coco. So
and in Paris, that's
I know, Coco. Coco, and then she had my name because my husband's. I never took my husband's last name, so it's Coco McCleeary.
Cool name.
Yeah, it works. No, his last name was Pétard, which means like a joint in French. Like it's, and he was like, it's just not a, like if it was a boy maybe, but like he wasn't super attached
can't think
to
why
it.
you didn't give your kid that name.
Right. And he's like a little girl trying to like deal with that. Like, no, and in English, no one can say it. Like, so he didn't like hyphenated
And
last
Coco
names.
McCleeary. I mean, she
And
sounds
Coco
like a
McCleery.
character in a book, doesn't she?
And
That's
like, yeah,
wonderful.
and like I don't know, my husband, it was really important. Like I found notes after he died that were like things he wanted for our daughter. And it was like to have like cool denim jackets and like leather perfectos and nice sneakers until she's 8. I don't know what happens when she's 8, but so we have like cute little like faux leather jackets that she likes to wear and walk around in.
This sounds like my little girl. She's got a very eclectic fashion taste, and I love it.
Oh yeah, she picks out her clothes. Even like the ladies at the crash sometimes are like, we can tell she's looking at what we're wearing. And then sometimes she likes it and we actually feel like we've gotten approval from someone who knows what they're talking about. I'm like, she's 2.5.
One of the mums at school told me I looked young, which I was very pleased about. And then Tabby got me to stand in front of her so she could assess whether she thought I looked young. And I just did it. I was like, I passed the test.
And so, yeah, it was one of them. She was like, yeah, I put on a coat with a nice belt. And she was like, oh, like joli manteau, and I was like super excited that she. And I'm like,
I love this. I love the sound of this kid. She sounds awesome.
She's got character.
But I am going to just drag you back into the sad stuff, if I may. Yes, we can have a little break every now and then and talk about clothes. But I'm thinking now. So you've now got a newborn baby, which anybody who has a baby or has had a baby knows that is no walk in the park. But you've also got a very sick husband.
Yeah.
How on earth did you manage?
I don't know.
That's a really good answer.
You do what you have to do. I mean, my family was there the first month or so to help, which was good because I think I kind of like underestimated how just like tired your body is and how your organs are just trying to get back in place. And typically I'm kind of like like to be out and about, pretty active, do a lot of sports. So it was like, okay, no, your body is really like,
fucked.
Like this is a sensation I've yet to have felt. And then my family left and we went to his mom's. So I think that's maybe what's unique to my situation is that I never had the, I guess, privilege of having someone. Like I've never known what it's like to have a full partner while I'm taking care of a kid. He did his best. He really tried to be there, and he would, any energy that he had went first to our daughter. But he's, in the summer, that summer was just getting used to the meds. They were readjusting things, trying to figure out what worked best. So, I mean, fortunately, newborns nap a lot. So
that is the only thing they have going for them.
Yes. And then I don't know if our daughter had some sort of I think she's just like this, or some sort of sixth sense that like I need to be calm, but at 2 months she started sleeping through the night.
That's really weird, okay, because Tabby is not a good sleeper. She was never a good sleeper from birth, and she's certainly not a good sleeper now at 6. The week that Ben died, she slept through the night. That 1 week. And I don't know why. It's weird. You're looking and thinking, oh, that's weird. But it's like it's the only thing that they can do for you in that moment is just give you that rest. Break. Yeah.
So she started sleeping through the night, and I woke up and I was breastfeeding, so like my boobs were enormous, and I was like, oh my God, I haven't fed all night. Like, is she alive?
You panic. You panic, yeah.
What's going on? And no, she just super sweet, laying there and all fine. And I was just like, this is great. And some people are like, wait. What did you do?
Everyone else in the maternity class hates you right now.
Nothing. We did nothing. She decided to do it, and that was it. Like, so I think
babies do what babies do, right? You can do all the sleep training. I had 2 that didn't sleep and 1 that was brilliant.
And it's just like that was it. And then she started like later on, she like was getting teeth in, so she'd wake up, but even then we'd like feed and she'd be back to bed in like 15 to 20 minutes, not like 3 hours, like some of my friends who would get up and then never have it. So I think that was, I think I probably would have cracked at that point. So it was, I can't compare it to having, like, I don't have any other child experience besides that, but I definitely was.
Did you feel that you were able to enjoy it? I know that's a bit of a challenging question, but It is hard, that early motherhood. It is really, it's relentless. And like you say, the physical, and I just remember bartering sleep, anything just for an extra 5 minutes, an extra 5 minutes. But you do, and there's that kind of fuzz, that glow, because you just are so in love with your baby. And I'm wondering if there was time for you to actually get to enjoy that in all of this.
Yeah, I definitely think there was time to enjoy it. I mean, there's also times that I like just looked at my kid and was like, I know that like you might not know your dad. Like that's really hard. Because even if we had that positive feeling, you're still like we're hitting like we're not gonna have a long life with a whole bunch of like I don't want to have a whole bunch of kids, but like there's amount of tragedy that's around your birth.
Oh God, yeah.
That's just like she's so perfect and precious, and then to think that she's gonna have to live through something really hard at some point.
God, you're setting me off.
It's really hard, and they're so little and perfect, and they just have their tiny little faces, and you're just like, I mean, you don't want anything bad to happen to them, and you know that she's gonna have to live through something really hard.
I know, and
so
you can't do anything. I think that's what I struggled with. Is you are there to protect them, and if something like this happens, there's absolutely fuck all you can do, and you have to just be there, the kind of shield between them and it, and that's an enormous responsibility as well, because you're going through hell yourself. But I really can relate to that. I can remember looking at Tabs and just thinking, you're kind of spared the grief because the boys were so aware of what happened, and you're spared that, but your beginning has been tarnished.
Right.
And your birth will forever be entwined with this loss. And that's and nobody wants that for their kid. Nobody wants that. We want them to have this nobody has a perfect life, all right?
No.
But we want that. We want that regardless.
Right.
And we think, and I always refer to the kind of Disney stories. Whenever, in fact, John took the 3 of the kids to see a film at the weekend, and he just texted me, was like, dead parent, obviously, because they all have a dead parent. So they're using it as this kind of worst thing that can happen for the protagonists. And then we're watching it play out in real life, and we can't stop it. So I think,
about
seeing you get emotional then, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. Anything to do with the kids, man. Anything to do with the kids.
Right. I think everything is hard about this, but I think that's probably the harder.
Especially when they know that they would have been such a great dad too.
When he wanted it so bad, and when I just see the energy that he would find, even though he'd, layered on all these different treatments and was completely exhausted and in pain, and it was, there was always time for her. There's always time to, make her laugh, and like the first, like I could get her to like smile, but like the first person who got her to really laugh and giggle was him, and he could do it like in 2 seconds. But then
this is dads though. They swan in. They swan in. They get the first smile, first word
all night, and like he wanted to be there to change the diapers. So he had a setup because bending over too far on his back would hurt, but he would move pillows around and find it a way so he could do it comfortably, because he didn't want to leave me all of it. And he ended up, there's a lot of stuff he just couldn't do. So I was like, well, this is not how we would have done it if you're fully healthy. But like I think from the get-go knew that it was never going to be 50-50. Is it ever 50-50? I think there's times that one parent does more, there's times the other parent does more. Like in the end it equals out, but various phases of life means you're doing more. But mine was like from the beginning, and my just the beginning of motherhood. I still think of the last visit I went to go see my friend before my husband went to the emergency room was like in the sun, running along the ocean, and it was like the last really carefree moment.
The last normal.
I just had this big belly, and like it was. But even at that point, like I had like an extra pillow for my knees being pregnant, and he had like 5 because his back was bothering him so bad. So it was like, okay, something's up. But we had kind of got into a groove. I was supposed to go back to work, but I was planning on like using some of my maternity leave to look for a new job. So I just didn't go back to work, and was able to negotiate a departure. I wanted to leave anyway, but that left me some extra time and more months. I was like, I don't.
They asked for volunteers for redundancy. I was like, yes.
When I was like, they're like, well, we can be flexible. You can come back like this. I was like, you know what? Financially, it makes the most sense for me to be on unemployment, because that's like what I get the best of. And like, you guys, you understand numbers really well. So, and I don't want the pressure every month to decide if I need to come back or not.
No, and it's hard enough leaving a baby to go back to work, but leaving a baby and a sick husband, man.
And I was just like, I'm not in a mental space. Like, I'm trying to keep a child alive, and then my husband has a life-threatening illness. Like, I just like email.
Got my plate
what? Like, can't think about it. So that was, I guess, in the fall, and my husband started, like, the treatment was going quite well. He was still quite tired, but, we were like, okay, well, maybe we can find something that works. Like, this is, maybe this could last a while. We'll see. And we went to the US for Christmas. And then while he was in the US, he kind of, I think, started feeling a little bit funky. And then, of course, we were super strict with like distancing and COVID and whatnot. And then he got COVID, so we had to stay an extra week. Yeah, so I was like, if anyone could have gotten COVID, I would have gotten COVID 5
Of course,
times,
he got
and not
COVID,
him.
yeah.
Like, at least, and my mom and my sister was also pregnant and had her baby, and so we had a premature born baby. So all these people who are at risk that were like, okay, everything is super, super strict, and then somehow, yeah, it's my husband who got sick. But then I think already the medicine had stopped working, and he was having sort of these like minor little seizures again, which meant that the brain tumor was back. So we got back, and a couple months later, it was brain surgery, radiation, different chemo.
Brain surgery, that's something
that was,
the way you're just like, brain surgery, but that's massive. That's a massive
and it was just
thing.
like, it was in a good location, but that was the tumor that was causing so he'd like re-lost the ability to use his left leg. And this is all in less than a year. That's just like twice as like medicine, losing use of your leg, brain surgery. And then I had at that point felt comfortable thinking about work again, and had been reached out to by someone I'd worked with before, who had worked freelance with in a job that I like, absolutely perfect job that I wanted. And she was, my boss is amazing, and was like, well, you can come back 3 days a week if you want. You can work from home even if you're in Paris. Like, I'll be like really flexible with, I understand your situation. She'd also just had a child, so it was very like, okay, like, we want, like, I think you're a good fit for the job, and we'll work with your family situation. But even then, I delayed the week I was supposed to start work because it's like, my husband's in the hospital with brain surgery. Like, how?
Yeah, you're not going to be able to concentrate. I'm just
No.
thinking that you must be very good at your job, because like people are really wanting you to come work for them here. So this is speaking a lot about you as well.
It was a bit of a niche, I suppose, that I was. She'd worked with me before and was happy with what I did, and it was in the like,
What do you do?
planning.
I'm being nosy now.
I work for an urban planning firm that specializes in bicycle urbanism, so like bike plans, infrastructure strategy. And then I was, they have an education department that does professional master classes and like learning expedition trips and big like research projects for European Union funded projects on like, greening cities or psychologistics, things like that. So I had experience with a lot more of the kind of teaching. I have an urban planning degree, but then also had done a lot of the sort of facilitating groups, bringing people together, building communities, doing masterclass sort of stuff. So I had an ensemble of skills that she liked, and then she didn't have to recruit anyone else. So
Nice.
Good fit, good culture, and really positive place to work. Which when you're dealing with a lot of shit at home, at least that was never an issue. So I could go to work, and it was
an escape, I guess.
Yeah, and I could just be, in charge of education and research, and people knew I had a kid, but colleagues knew that my husband was sick, but no one, or I kind of like mentioned it, and it's not that I didn't want to hide it. The problem is,
as soon as you mention it, people want to ask questions, and then you're getting pulled into a long conversation, aren't you?
And it was, I mean, for most part, like, I'm pretty transparent if you ask, but it's amazing how easily, if you don't leave, it's amazing how easy it is to leave out information.
Like really big information as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, but like, if I get into it, then I get into it. And it's nice to go to work where I'm not every week having to give an update. And I love that I have friends who got that update every week. When they would see me, they'd ask how things were going. We talk about it for 2 minutes or an hour, depending on where I was at. Which I needed that, but then it also was really great to be in a place where it wasn't.
Yeah, I think we all need somewhere where we can just be like kind of normal. And we talk about having the babies, and when Ben died, I can remember taking Tabby back to the baby groups because you've got that whole, I don't want them to be completely tarnished by this thing that's happened, but also I could go there and sing, Wind the Bobbin. Do you have Wind the Bobbin up in Paris? I don't know. Wind the Bobbin Up. It's a classic. And it's not. You're going to Google it afterwards, and you won't be able to stop singing it. And you're normal. You can just be Tabitha's mum. Like, I didn't have to be the widow, and I didn't know many people in the class, so it wasn't like everybody knew my story, and I just would keep quiet and just enjoy being with her. And I think a lot of people find solace in work or sport or whatever it be. I think when you are going through some sort of traumatic experience, you need an escape. So I'm really glad that this opportunity came along for you.
So that was, it just fell in nicely. And then, my boss knew what was going on, but she wasn't also asking she's like, I kind of sensed that, like, it was just nice for you to come be somebody else here. And I was like,
yeah,
you know what? I hadn't thought of it that way, but it is nice. And I can just like make jokes about stuff, and it doesn't have to be as heavy. And I can progress. Like, I have a future, even if my husband doesn't. So that was
actually, that's really key, that.
And it's like not something you really want to think about, but I think that's where maybe I'm ready to talk 5 months after my husband passed, because there's this whole grieving process that starts much earlier when you have cancer. And so I guess I started
anticipatory grief. I think that's the word, anticipatory grief. So you've already done a lot of your grieving and your planning and your mourning, but that doesn't mean that when they actually die, it's not an enormous shock. You
so
can't
awful,
prepare.
Yeah. And it's something else, and like to see them get to the point where they die after years of struggling is not something that. So I don't know what's better, because we've experienced both.
The eternal debate, right? The eternal debate.
There isn't one that's better, but I think as far as my mental health, I think maybe, I don't know, because then there's 2 years, 3 years of my life that have been under immense, like, sort of existential stress, because I know what's coming. And it was probably, I think, that summer. So I started working. My daughter was about a year old, and we'd, had this brain surgery. We're starting a chemo. It didn't work. It wasn't just it was the beginning of just starting, like, basically our life was on a 3-month schedule, and we'd have the next scans, because we'd have things that we felt were working, but it'd work in the lungs, and then the brain tumor would come back, or it'd work in the brain, but then the lung tumor would come back. And it was just like every shifting new treatments. And I think that summer I didn't look online, because just don't ever look online if anything's wrong ever, because you're definitely
dying.
But I found statistics that was basically like that type of cancer, if it's diagnosed, and it was numbers from the US. I was like, okay, so you can say it's a little bit different because healthcare is different. People might not go as early, but ultimately it was people who were diagnosed with this type of cancer, and it was metastasized, like, in an organ far away. So the brain is about as far as you can get from the lungs. It was something like 7 or 9% of people with that diagnosis are alive 5 years later.
Oh God, I thought you were going to say survive it, but 5 years, so that's not a great statistic, is it?
No, so it's like 1 out of 10, and you don't know what state they're in. Like 5 years later, and like, this isn't just projections. This is like stats from like the last set of, like, most recent set of data from the late 2010s of actual diagnosed cases and their survival rates. So when you see that, and like, I have a 1-year-old daughter, and I was like, okay, we're gonna shut my computer, but like, this is what no one's saying and no one wants to say, but like, I can't.
You can't ignore it, can you?
I can't ignore that, and I can't.
It.
We can say that there's always a chance. There's that 7%. Yes, there's that, or 9% or whatever it was, but it was under 10. We can say he's healthy, but like, we're dealing with something that's, like, not going to end. If he makes it to our daughter's 5th birthday, it's gonna be like a miracle. I mean, I don't believe, I've never been religious, but it was like some sort of for unusual reasons we've gotten here, but like, there is going to be something pretty extraordinary that happens for him to make it that long.
And everybody hopes that still that there'll be that because we hear of miracles, don't you? Hear of people just, but I think
we like those stories.
Of course,
the sad
we
ones
do.
We don't like to tell all the time,
no.
Or we do, but there's so many of them, they get lost.
And also, you feel like, why not me? Like, why can they have a miracle and not me? It's that you get quite. I felt like a kind of cross toddler almost. I'm like, it's not fair, and it isn't fair. It isn't fair, and
yeah, I have to say I was never quite stumbled, because I have a friend who lost her dad, and she was very like, it's just not fair. And I was like, but I don't know where. And maybe it was his brother dying shortly before that. Like, there's nothing, life just
Nothing's
isn't
fair.
fair. Life isn't fair. We're going to start from a beginning point where things are unfair and things are unjust. And what we're trying to do as humans and like in communities is trying to make things fair and more just and whatever for everyone. But like, that's not the natural state of things, which
No,
is
and it's a
pessimistic perhaps and
cliche.
sad, but
It's the truth of it, isn't it?
it's
And
the reality.
it's a real cliche to say that cancer doesn't discriminate. And we all know that there are mitigating things you can do to improve your chances if you get cancer. But when it comes in, and it comes in big and strong, and it comes into a healthy young person, the kind of outcomes of these are often not great, because for it to take control so quickly without any predispositions, without any,
No.
dangerous lifestyle factors, then this thing is tough.
And that's like essentially what I was like, okay, well, and he never had symptoms of like his lungs. We think that the voice thing wasn't actually a tumor in his lung. It was more of like a tumor in his brain that was hitting something. We still
Okay.
don't really know. So we never had, like, there's nothing that we missed that could have indicated it was his lungs that were the problem. So we were kind of just fucked from the
It's like a
beginning.
silent assassin, this thing, isn't it? It's
Pretty much, yeah. It was awful, but that was, I think so, like a year in, and I was like, okay, this is at that point I'd already sort of or had grieved or was grieving this sort of like, okay, our life isn't going to be at all. It hasn't been, and I don't think it's going to be very soon something that we would have imagined before. It's going to be sort of long-term hard. And sort of this is ending with him dying, not with, years of remission.
Did you talk about this with him, this idea that he was going to die, or the chances were very much tilted against his favour? I'm curious, because I personally haven't had yet, I imagine, because at some point I probably will. We all lose somebody to an illness at some point, but I've not had to do the sort of conversation about the end. So I can't. I've spoken to other people that have, obviously, but for me, I can't really imagine having to do that. And I suppose I'm trying to just kind of get an understanding of how well, that's not the right word, how he responded to this information.
I didn't directly go tell him that I found these statistics. I was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna, like, this is, and I think the doctor, he really wanted to not protect me, because he was open with all of the things. He was told me all the, like, recap of what he had at the doctor. But I think to a certain extent, it was his demon to deal with, and he knew I was taking care of everything else. And, I think 1 week out of the whole entire time that our daughter was alive and he was alive, he picked up every day from the creche and I dropped off. So there was 1 week that we split 50-50 pick up and drop off. And normally he would help 1 or 2 days a week, would have a babysitter, but like I was doing a lot more of the work. So I think he was kind of keeping some of the worst. He would reshare it, because when I like would do recaps with the doctor after, he's like, okay, he was completely transparent about it. But I don't know when it was like, we knew that there was going to be an after that he wasn't there. We didn't really have a timeline. So, he wanted to do some, like he had some small, an apartment that he bought. He wanted to set things up with a notaire to make sure that, like, the notary had things in line. We're looking at things that are sort of, we know that there's going to be a future without him, but like, is it in 10 years? And he would always joke, even when we were younger, he's like, he had torn both ACLs. Like, he's just a great habit for like breaking bones while playing sports or something. So he always kind of made this joke that like at 40 his knees wouldn't work anymore, and I would be pushing him in a wheelchair while I ran a marathon, or that he would, he's just like, no one in my family lives. I was like, okay, well, that was a joke. Now it's not
Hilarious,
a joke.
right?
I don't think this is very funny. So it was kind of a reference. And he's also just, you want to live, like, you're young, you have a daughter, you have a life that you want. And
You don't
he
want to
was
believe it.
still working. He had worked for this American company that was a startup that during COVID needed someone in France because it was dealing with vineyards, and they had some, like special cameras that were doing analysis. So he was perfectly placed also to kind of like do the strategic link between these. And he also like loved wine. And every time we went on, like drove anywhere, we'd stop at some random vineyard and just make friends with the guy and like, what's your best wine? And we'd taste a whole bunch of stuff. So our cab was always full of, I mean, no one who knows him was ever like, he'd disappear and we're like, where'd he go? And he'd come back up from the basement with like more bottles. And so he was very good at relating to someone who might be a little bit more just like a farmer in the side of France, but then could also talk to people in a startup in the United States. So he was
A chameleon.
Yeah, and really well placed to make that, because he'd, been to, I'm from Ohio, so it's the Midwest, and could relate to people there, but then also, he could go to a one-star restaurant and he could talk about wine with somebody. And so just a quite a relatable person in a lot of context.
And did the hospital ever kind of sit you guys down together? And, at what point was the conversation had? Because they must have told you at some point that there is nothing more we can do.
Yeah. So it would have been, so this summer I looked things up, and then it would have been like 8 months later, like the following March, when we had just continued to try new things. So it would have been March 2023. And he got home from a doctor visit, and I knew, and he had actually had a chemo that like he felt really good. He had no hair, but like he felt good. So we were kind of like cautiously optimistic that it was okay, that maybe even though chemo, like you can't be on chemo forever, it's poison, and like his body had lost like 20 kilos at this point, like yeah, but we're like, hey, if you actually feel good, and this was like that week when he went and picked up our daughter like every day and felt good enough to walk to the creche and come back, because everything here is walking. And I got back and kind of looked at him and was like, okay, what's up? He's like, just go to your run. Like, I was planning to go for a run. He's like, just go. And I was like, I knew then that I was like, this is bad news, because he doesn't want to tell me in front of Constance. So I went for that run, and I knew I was just kind of like, I'm just gonna enjoy this last, like, I don't know, 40 minutes before I'm figuring out, like, get bad news, and it's nice out, and I'm just gonna go for this run, and like, I know something bad is coming, and I know it's probably like,
I bet you just wanted to keep running, didn't you? I bet
and
you
I was
didn't
like,
want
I'm
to
just
come
gonna
back.
go. Yeah, I'm just like, I just want to keep going, and if I keep going, maybe like it's not gonna happen. But I got back, and his doctor was like, your lungs look great, but your brain, like, there's like, they don't even tell us how many tumors are in there. Like, there's so many tumors that have come back, and a whole bunch of little ones that are just everywhere. And when there's too many, which in general they're at, like, 'cause we only had one surgery this whole time, because if you have a ton of tumors, like, what's the point? Like, you can't, like, you need a treatment that's going to kill them. You can't just carve each one out.
Especially with the brain.
And she was like, we're going to go, radiation worked before, it was targeted radiation. So it was just on the one tumor after his surgery. This time they're like, we're doing general, so it's your whole brain that gets radiated. Like, it's just hardcore, and it's intense. And at the same time, they're like, well, we can wait till that's done to start another chemo. And he's like, no, go directly. Like, I'm not. And like, that's where it was like, if there's an option, it's like, let's just do it. But that means he's building up chemo and radiation at the same time. And then that's when she said, look, this is really serious. Or not, we already know serious. She's like, we've tried everything. We're gonna keep treating it. But at this point, we're getting into older versions of the medicine that we know are going to be less effective. And so that was, I guess I'd already, like, that day is coming, but then have it confirmed was like, and she didn't give us any time either. And he was like, what, do I have 2 years? Do I have 1 year? Do I have, like, what is it? And she's like, I forget, but it was never a concrete time, because it was like, you don't know. But it was kind of like, this is really aggressive, and we're doing everything we can, but like, there's nothing that's working, and we can't pile on 3 different treatments to treat every different part of your body, because like, you just can't, then your quality of life, like, you're not going to enjoy, like, you're going to be just in bed. So like, what can we do to preserve the best quality of life for as long as possible? But basically, like, there's nothing new. Like, everything we're going to do is going to be slightly less effective moving forward. And And that, like, we knew, I guess we'd already vocalized that was happening. We already knew that, we wanted to set things up. At that point, I was like pretty like, okay, can we just switch everything to my name now? Because he did a lot of the bill payment, and it wasn't that I didn't understand it. He was just like, you're doing all the physical stuff. You're doing all of that other, like, that mental charge of things. Like, I can sit in bed and like move some things around on the computer. But that was also like his last thing that he could do and control. So it was like, okay, just, put like Netflix. It's dumb, but like,
yeah,
let's put my name on it instead of
yeah.
yours. And it just
Because you don't
wasn't.
realize how many things are in their name until they die.
And that,
Like, it's
like,
mental.
I'm still in it. Like, and like, fortunately, he was a big picture person. So he had created a holding with his uncle that had like 2 parking spots and a couple investments, but they were all recent. So like, they're not paid off. Now I'm like still in the whole succession steps. Blah. But it was then that it was like, okay, we need to start preparing things in a much more concrete way and not just in a hypothetical way. We had already, just because our daughter's whole life, we're pretty good at just getting good photos, lots of videos, keeping kind of like, okay, this, like, there's some baseball hats that you see in a ton of photos that my husband was wearing that I'm like, okay, we're going to keep this, a scarf. And he was already pretty like into, he got into watches. And then I don't know, the first summer he was sick, he like had this like morphine high where he's like, we need to enjoy the money we have while we have it, and just like bought 5 watches while trying to find the perfect one that he's going to give to our daughter when she's older. So
You know
like, oh
that
my God.
my life husband John is one of the founders of a company called Watchfinder, which yeah.
Well, I might have some to sell on there.
He doesn't work for them anymore. They got
Okay.
bought out in 2020, funnily enough. But yeah, it's funny hearing, because Sarah, Holly's mum, had a nice watch that's in a safe for her. And I'm like, I got Ben like a £50 fossil watch from we were sort of in our 20s, and that's his watch. But
That's his watch.
Yeah. I can't actually find it, but that's another conversation.
We have a couple different levels of watches, but no, he was just on this like, we should enjoy life. Like, already had this idea in general, was like a good, like, bon vivant, as they say in French, like have a good time with your friends, get out, like, let's enjoy the time that we have. And then especially with his brother passing away, it was like, you never know when things are going to end, and then he gets sick. So really pushed, I think, the whole time through, even through feeling like crap, like, let's try to schedule a weekend away. Let's go do this. So he went on a, weekend with the guys in Spain, and like called me. He was like, yeah, I threw open the trash can like 3 times, but he went. So it was, not ideal, but he, still tried to be a, guy in his mid-30s who's a dad and doing things. And after his radiation, so after we got that diagnosis, he felt okay. So we went to the US, which we knew was going to be more or less our last time, or very likely the last time he would come with me. So it would have been spring of 2023. And he was exhausted because I think he always underestimated how tired he was after radiation. But it fell in our 7th wedding anniversary. So my parents, or my sister, was like, I know you're super, like, you don't have time to plan anything, but let's get together because I know people want to see him. And I have a huge family, like 50 of us. So my mom and my sister decided to throw us a 7th wedding anniversary party.
Cute.
But that way we could have a ton of family get together without having it be because
he's
John's dying. Come say goodbye. Like, it was, hey, and our wedding, we got married really quickly because for the visas to come back to France, even though we knew we'd get married, and we were still planning to have a 2026, like 10-year big, huge weekend wedding where we'd invite everyone, all of our friends from all over the world to come hang out. Clearly we're not doing that. But we wanted to have kids and then just have a big party when we had, more money. So we never celebrated our wedding with my family, really. So it was kind of the opportunity to be like, it's our 7th wedding anniversary.
Did you wear a nice dress? That's a big question.
I wear a cute, fun. It was like a big, fun floral dress that I was like, okay, we're just going to do something loud and, with like a brick red, bright lipstick, and just, okay, we're just going to have a fun, flowy kind of backyard party kind of thing. So it was, it was great, but it was, it was great just to have. And my sister was like, you guys don't worry about anything. We're doing catering, like just and it was a ton of fun. and then, he could take a nap if he needed to because it was in my parents' backyard instead of doing it at a venue. And like our daughter was just, I don't know, everyone thinks she's just the cutest little Parisian, and she'll say things like in French and they're just like, oh my goodness, like, how cute. And I mean, she's obviously, I'm biased. I think she's adorable, but
they are cute. That's nature's way of keeping them with us,
right,
because
right.
like I wouldn't take that attitude from anybody that wasn't cute.
Well, I'm like, she's just like, okay, enjoying life. And she'd be like, Mama, where are you? And then someone would come find me and they're like, okay, she wants to say hi. And she'd be like, okay, just checking. And then she'd go off and play. And like, there's a
But
ton
do you
of
think
kids.
that's
And
like just making sure you're still there, like the
Mommy's
eyes
there.
on? My kids are
There
like that. They need to know. They're not desperately clingy anymore. They went through a phase, but it's more they need to know where I am.
She's there. Okay, all good. So we did that, and then we got back, and he was, I mean, it took a lot out of him. And he just, like, the summer, like, I mean, things were going great at work, things were busy, our kids going, but we're feeling, we know that just
time is ticking.
But that summer we were able, his doctor put him back on the first medicine that he had, and I think it was probably one of the, like, she knew it wouldn't be effective for long because it had already stopped working before, but he was able to get into nice enough shape over the summer that we could take like a family trip to Portugal, and my sister came with her little kid, and he really felt, I think, the best he'd felt in like over a year, coincidentally, for that trip. And it was great. We have a beautiful photo album. It was perfect weather. Like, he was voluntarily getting up at like 9:30 and 10, which like typically I'm alone every morning till like noon because he would sleep until noon. So I was always me and my daughter in the mornings, like doing whatever. And then I wouldn't want to go far away for a day trip or something because when he wakes up, I want her to have time with him. So, but he was getting up and like ready to go. So it was, I think, a really sort of precious amount of time. But then we got back last fall, and it was kind of just a slow, or not so slow, I guess, decline of more treatments. Okay, we're going to layer this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Fatigue, pain, constantly. And I think our daughter just, like, she knew the whole, like, she knows daddy was sick. And then sometimes I would have to leave to go do something, and she would just, like, 20-month-old would just sit and play on the bed for an hour, like next to him while he would like nap and kind of sleep. She'd play with her toys and just be next to him. So it was like one of those things again where you're like, there's some like symbiotic thing that's happening here. Mom needs to go do something, and like daddy doesn't have the energy to, but like you're going to go down to his energy level and be calm. And it's like, that's, I mean, I think partly just her, and then partly something else that she sensed.
They're very intuitive kids, and I think especially when they're younger, I think it sort of drifts out of them a little as they get older. But when they're little, and that's that kind of visual image of her sitting and playing next to her dad, who's too sick to really be able to play with her. That's quite a powerful image, actually. It is.
It's, I mean, sweet, but also just so sad. And I think sometimes when you're in it, like, it's sad and it's hard. And like, I don't know how many times I rode, like, I ride my bike to work. It's about 30 minutes. And I don't know how many times I would just like cry on my way to work. And that like bike ride of just letting it out, going to work. Okay, like, now I'm at work, and now I'm like transitioning to that person who's like, okay, I'm just here. We're doing dynamic stuff. I'm often presenting and leading things where it takes a certain like amount of mental and, I guess, emotional energy of being peppy and getting people pumped, and like, but
it's
like
almost
there's
like
that transition.
Putting a mask on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like
Just kind of like, this is where I'm at. And then, I mean, I have that in a couple places because I also have a group that I've doing these workout classes with the same coach through COVID. And like, while I was pregnant, I was working out with him. So this whole group of people who'd seen me like every week, but it was another place. And like, my husband was very like, okay, I know that getting up, like I had to be there at 11, and like getting up for him at 11 every Sunday. He's like, okay, sometimes it was hard, but like, I know you need that. And I know that you're going to be like, that's the only day I have to get up to do something for you. So like, you do our daughter every single morning. So I'm going to like, you do it, you had to go, go have that time, and like, good vibes, fun people. But like most of them, I mean, some people knew my husband was sick, but for the most part, again, it was another place where it was like, I'm going to do this for me. I feel better. I've always been someone who's very sort of attached to, not attached, but I'm kind of, I guess my therapy is going out for a long run or doing something physical like that really just helps me center
yoga
my mind.
for me.
Like
It
when I'm
didn't
doing
used to
that,
be.
I don't think about other, like that's one of the few places where I'm not bogged down or thinking about other things or being distracted. So it was
Running's quite good at that because it hurts so much that you can't think about anything else. Maybe that's just my experience of running.
You're
I can't
distracted
do it
by the
anymore. My
pain.
hips keep going. I'm the wrong side of 40 now.
That's I mean, running was always, I've always did sports and stuff when I was a kid, so it's been a nice way to.
I definitely did not do sports as a kid. I'm a late adopter.
I mean, you know, it's never too late.
Well, I do. I love yoga, and I do walk a lot, and I actually saw. Here we go, completely different tangent here. We're middle of your death story. I'm just going to tell you. So my chiropractor, new chiropractor, and he said, and I think it's like a third health professional that said to me, well, because I'm hypermobile, so my muscles are working extra, and it's like maybe some weightlifting, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this, aren't I? This is like the third person.
No, I don't. I like that's what I started doing a lot with it, and like I can tell you, if you need to distract, like you can't think about other things when you're weightlifting. Like that effort is, even if it's not really like the thing that gets you excited, like it's.
I just kind of and also 40-odd menopausal, like we need to do what we can for those bones, right?
Gotta get it, and like you'll be like everyone has their level, but that's something. I'll
be entering into bodybuilding contests. You wait, I won't,
and you like get to it's I've seen
it's distraction like most things are, but it's a healthy distraction. It's not wine or drugs.
Leads to other sort of like positive outcomes for you. So it's and when I went back to work, so I started 3 days a week and then went to 4, and then I just never went to 5. I did for a month, and then we found out brain surgery. Like we got the bad news that things aren't ever going to get better, and I was like, I'm just doing 4 days a week. So Fridays, my daughter goes to daycare, and I drop her off. I go for a long run, and then the afternoon, sure, I do all those things that you do on the weekends. But when you have the primary care for your kid, you don't have time to do groceries, calling, whatever, doing admin, life admin. Sometimes it's just getting a pedicure, but I think that like
you need it. I paid for a childminder for funny enough, it was Fridays for Tabby because I needed just one day where I could, and it was only within the hours of the school day where the boys are at school. But it just, I joined the gym, I used to go to a class. Sometimes I just, maybe do a laundry, and finding something that gives you that space is so important.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's part of why I was able to kind of not have a breakdown at any point, was like, okay, I'm handling a lot at work, and sure, like my 4 days at work need to be really productive because I'm only there 4 days, so I can't really relax at work. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, this is like I'm in front of my computer and my brain is just like, meh, 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 like error, nothing's working, and I'm like, I don't really have time. Like I don't have time. Like I don't just, there's no time in my day for this. So the Fridays was like, okay, I know I can do something for me, and then I can do all those things that I need to get done during a weekend, but that means I can be there during the weekend for our daughter and my husband, and I can do something. So I think that was key. And now I'm like, what if I ever have to go back to 5 days a week, which like at one point I might have to, what is that? We should all have a day of rest, a day to do. I gotta be honest,
I don't know if I can remember the last time I worked 5 days, but I do have 4 kids, so I reckon that counts as quite a stressful job.
One kid, one kid is it's obviously a challenge, but it's a kid for an adult, so like.
But in some ways, I've got friends who've only got one child, and often because their husband died, unfortunately. And I think sometimes it's harder because you are all they've got. So my kids, they annoy the crap out of each other, don't get me wrong, but they will eventually play. Like if we go on holiday, they will accept that they have to own each other for company, so they'll play. Whereas if it's just you and one child, that can be quite, it's demanding.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think it's really great that we didn't plan this, but my husband is convinced we did, that my sister had a son at the same time. So he's 4 months younger than my daughter.
This is your identical twin sister.
Yeah. We didn't plan this. This was not, but I guess we're at the same point in our lives.
Twin magic.
My brother-in-law, Ben, is like, yes, we did it. We timed it up. And I was like, Ben, like, we didn't. It just happened that way. And so it happened that way. But so when we could go to, for example, to Portugal, we had the 2 kids. So sometimes it's wild because you had like 2 kids who are 2 years old, but they play together and they get annoyed at each other like siblings. But then like they're always like, where's Ceddy? And like Cedric and like Coco, Ceddy, Coco, Ceddy.
That's so cute.
Cedric. So there's Cedric and Coco. And they, play together. And then I have a really good friend who was, we didn't know that we were both pregnant because it was COVID. But our kids are born 10 days apart, and she lives down the street. So her son Romeo, who lives on a balcony, is Coco's
Cool
good
names,
friend.
these
So I
kids.
know, it's like, so she's like, yeah, so she's someone I still like. She watches my daughter all the time.
Yeah, you need a network. You absolutely need a
And she's
network.
her and her husband also watched my daughter when my husband was at the end, when he was dying, like in the hospital. So they've been just, I can never really express to them. And I tell her, she's like, it's normal. Who wouldn't have watched your kid? I'm like, it's not normal. You are incredibly generous, and you take my child like she's your
No,
own.
you think it would be normal, but it isn't normal. And actually, it shows a great level of compassion and kindness. And I always say to people, if somebody has lost somebody, whether it's a partner or, just a really intense bereavement or trauma, offer to help with the kids, because you won't want to let your kid out of your sight, but also you have to have some time. You have to.
Well, and it adds up. Like the cost of paying people to watch your kids is like, even with all the help and whatever you want, like to just know I can drop her off and
they'll be safe and happy.
And then she has someone to play with, and my friend like just had another baby, and I was like, I feel like I shouldn't do this. Like she's like, but then they play together and I don't have to worry about them. Like, yeah, so I can focus on the other kids. So it's, I think having some friends with children who are the same age takes away some of that pressure. And then we have a number of other families that like friends who have a house in Normandy who invite us, and then they have sons, so my daughter's like all loves to hang out with them. And another good family friend with a daughter that like my daughter just adores, and like, oh my
they
gosh,
love it when there's somebody a little bit older, don't they? They love an older friend.
So it's I think I'm fortunate to have a number of our friends had kids old. I guess my husband's a couple years older than me, and a couple of his friends who are females had a couple year older like husbands, so like they were all starting to have kids a little bit earlier. So now we have a number of friends who have children who are a little bit older.
Safety in numbers, everything. My friend.
Yeah. And then so we can go do things that are like really adapted and easy. I mean, at the same time, it's important. I have friends who are single women. I'm like, this is great because I can have a babysitter and we're going to go out and do things and not worry about kids. Like,
yes, not to have to carry snacks and water bottles. That's
right. And then
not to have to take
my pull out. Like, I'm like, look, I have like, who needs applesauce? Like,
I've got a massive bag under my desk here that I've just moved out the shop for recording, and the kitchen is like this, and it's got like half-eaten sweets and things
like all the things.
You can't wriggle away. I'm going to pull you back in again now.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind. And again, you can say no to any questions I ask, but I'm going to ask you if you don't mind taking me to the end. I know this is always a really sensitive subject. And things like, I guess I'm interested in how you tell a child of Coco's age that this is happening, how they process it. But as always, if there's anything you don't want to talk about, anything that makes you feel really horrible, please don't. Okay, I don't want to cause you distress.
No, of course. So yes, we get back and it's fall, like last fall, and it's just kind of just. We're saying he's getting tired, like more tired. He's more just not himself in the sense that like he's just super grouchy, but he's constantly in pain and like just and we're I guess talking more like he's talking to the notes there, like he we know that kind of an end is coming, but like I'm like, okay, we're on a really like every 3 months is a gift. So but I got to the point last fall where I was like, this is like I'm kind of like being in limbo like this. Like at the beginning we had ups and downs, and right now we're just having consistent hard downs, and that's at one point like, and he's just in constant pain, and pain was one thing, but then there was phases where he would have nausea and couldn't eat, and he's already super skinny, and then like for some reason that was worse to experience than like just the pain. But so I got to a point where I'm like, okay, this is really like it's really hard, and like there's nothing getting better, so it's like, well, it was just this waiting game that was I think almost more challenging at some points than a lot of the other stuff.
You're literally waiting for somebody to die so they can get some respite from the thing that's hurting them. Like what a rock and a hard place, right?
And then to a certain extent it was like, kind of get to this more afterwards, but there's a certain amount of relief when like that's what you're living with, like that you're relieved that they're no longer feeling that pain, but then also like there's a relief for me personally that I'm not trying to help someone who can't be helped, like it's, or who can't be helped. You can help them with a little bit that you can, but you know that
you can't save them.
There's it's heading towards something and it's really hard to work towards something you know is going to end badly.
Yeah. And I think actually the people come on here and are brave enough to say that sometimes it is a relief when they die, because you feel like, oh my God, I can't believe I've said that. But actually, if there's no coming back and the alternative is that they writhe around in agony, they starve, in that you don't want that for them.
It's awful. And like to watch that and to see, and he wanted to hold on as long as possible. So it was fall and we managed to go away to our friends like in Normandy in December. It was a really busy fall for work. And some people were like, oh, do you regret working so hard? I was like, no, because honestly, and he was the last person who wanted me to miss out on something that was really cool with work or to advance myself because of his illness. That was like very straight. He said,
And like
okay,
you say,
well, my
you've
mom
got
will
to
come.
put things in place. You've got
And
to have plans in place. You've got to provide for your daughter.
That's what some people were like, well, are you gonna like just when like in March when we'd gotten the news, they're like, well, are you just gonna go on leave for 6 months? I was like, well, no, because it might not be 6 months. It could be a year and a half. I don't know. But like I also then what am I like, and even he was able to work with the company he was at. Like they had no idea how many hours he was working, which it didn't ultimately matter. He had a role of being that link and being able to make some strategic decisions and understand French culture. And he would get on and I could tell it was like even like it was important for him too, because I could tell when he got on those phone calls, and it was in the US, so like time zone wise it worked to his advantage. He could sleep in and then still get in on calls that were later in the day. But he was the person that, the John that I knew that, was ready to go manage a business and like, okay, talk about strategy. And he could be someone else even if it was an hour. He wasn't just a sick person. And I think for me it wasn't just being the caretaker to a sick person and a toddler. It was like, okay, well, I have these other things going on. And like we have the right to have different sides of us and not just let the suffering and not just let the illness be our identity. I mean, some people do let that be it. But it wasn't, I guess, our style or our way of doing things. We wanted to still, scaled back trips, but we still did them. But I guess December, the plan typically we'd alternate every 2 years. We'd go to Christmas in France, Christmas in the United States. So normally this year was Christmas in the United States, but he was not in great shape and he was getting another round of radiation in his back because he started having tumors in his spinal column that were causing an excruciating amount of pain. So we thought in December, it was pretty bad, but he'd had radiation. He's like, okay, we're going to have Christmas together in France. And then I was flying out with my daughter on the 26th to go to the US. And he was like, okay, I'll stay at my mom's. It'll be calm that way. And I think he was a bit relieved too that like he really put a lot of energy into being there for our daughter, even when it hurt. And I think to just let himself heal. But I guess while we were gone, and I left and I was like, okay, I really struggled because I was like, do I leave or not? Like, he's not in great shape. But I also, like,
You needed a break.
And, my mother-in-law has clearly been through it, but she's got very different ways of processing and she's much more in the passive. And I think she's always suffered with depression, never really got treated. And then you have these really crappy things that happen to you. And the weight of being in that house for me is not like, it's not a pleasurable place. Like my husband wants to go there. Look, we have my big family house, but I'm like, it's a big family house full of unfinished construction projects from when your parents were together, that were never finished. That's just like a parallel for their couple that they never worked on. Like, I have all these memories of, your brother dying here. We just have extra stuff of your guys's. That's just like this. There's some bad juju
it's not
in
a
there.
safe comfort for you.
And it's very much, we were the ones in charge. Like every time we go there, his mother is there for us, but like we tell her what to do. Like she'll never propose. She doesn't want to impose. She's like, I don't know. Like it's very much like, I think it was just, she's educated that way. Okay, no, you tell me what to do. I don't want to impose or like upset or like, you guys make the choice. Like that's my way of being polite. But I'm like, sometimes I don't want to decide.
Yeah. The weight of the responsibility, right?
I'm like, my mental charge is like out the roof here. Like, and so we would, even as he got into his camp, like really late on, like we were making decisions about things that, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast, but that I was like, why is he managing like all these things for you guys right now when you're like 60 or you're young enough? You're not like 85-year-old people who can't understand technology. Like, so it was even to that point. So it was just not a place that I was like, I don't want to spend 2 weeks here. Like,
So when you
and
were away, could you sense
yeah,
that there was some deterioration going on? You could
I think he didn't, I knew that there was people there that if I needed to get back, like our good friend who's the doctor was there, and I was like, okay, if I
give you a
really need to
call.
get back tomorrow, like, there are people who will tell me. But I know when I talked to him, I was like, okay, are you feeling better at all? And he's like, no, the pain's not going away. And like they had targeted one tumor in his spinal cord, but they hadn't seen that there was another one that grew while he was getting the radiation therapy. And he
This
was on
thing's
like a,
a bastard, isn't
oh
it?
my God, yeah. And like his ribs were hurting, and they think that they're like, well, there might be tumors inside the bone that are like literally cracking the bone from the inside. Like,
Oh my
it was just like, and
God.
that's, you're just like, this is like, no one should go, like you're being tortured, like
That's
you're,
awful.
and it was just like in sound, like it was super sensitive to sound, and like if you had cutting with a fork, like because of the brain tumor. So it was like he's living in
Poor
like a
guy.
torture suit. Like it's not. So we left, and I was like, he's like, yeah, no, my back really hurts. Like I couldn't even cut my own meat today. My mom had to cut it, and I was like, okay, this is not good. And then probably like, oh, like I was there for like 12 days. And then like, I guess like the 1st of January, like he called and he's like, yeah, we're trying to figure out. And I would call and he's like, yeah, like, okay, I'm really tired. Like, I don't want to talk right now. I was like, we just need a video for like Coco to see you. And he's like, yeah, we're having a discussion because like I'm in a ton of pain. We're going to drive me back to Paris. And he didn't want an ambulance. So we had our like really good friends of ours who drove him back over the night. And our friend Margot, the doctor, who like got a special prescription to give him these pain meds to basically knock him out in the car so he could make it back. And then he went to a hospital that he'd been seeing for pain for about a year and a half, which ironically was the same hospital that I gave birth to our daughter in. It's a maternity and a palliative care hospital.
Oh, both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't want to visit every floor of this building in the same 3 years. So he was already checked into the hospital when I got back, and I actually at home, I had a great amount of fun. I was like sick when I got there with a cold, but I think I knew, I was like, look, I need to
You
fill up my cup
stopped.
as much as possible. I talked to people, like we had this huge family Christmas party. My daughter had a blast, and like, and I have a ton of cousins who are around my age, have kids, and like, it's just, I'm like, this is a place where people are understanding of what's going on, but like, if they're not, if I need to sit and cry with them, they'll sit and cry with me. If I need to laugh and have a fun time, you know, and
That's
just
okay too.
and like just all like giggle at children, like whatever, like that's. And my sister is on the ball with her husband, like, you know what, we're gonna have this time to go out. Mimi and K-pop are taking care of the kids. We're gonna go
What
dancing.
did they call you? K-pop.
Mimi and K-pop, that's my parents'
Nice.
name. So Mimi, and then my dad's name is Kevin, and he's a pop. So he saw K-pop as in Korean pop and was like, that's a great name for me. And I was like,
He named himself. I love that.
yeah. So, and it just stuck because once we heard his reasoning, and I was like, you know that K-pop is a thing, Dad. He's like, yeah, I saw that, and I thought it was a good proper
I
name for
love
me.
that. What a
So
dude. I
Mimi and
love those.
K-pop. Yeah. So I was like, so it just stuck immediately. So he's K-pop. And it's really cute. K-pop. So
My
we
dad
went
is Popper.
Papa, and that's, yeah.
Popper,
So we
yeah.
have, and anyway, so I had, because some people afterwards are like, do you regret that you went to the US? And I was like, had I known that he was going to die so quickly after I returned, I probably wouldn't have gone. But at the same time, when like it was just everyone sitting in silence and anticipation, already
That
Christmas
would have been
dinner was like,
awful.
my husband doesn't want to, like he wants, if he's struggling, and I think an important thing for people who are injured or handicapped or sick is like letting them maintain their autonomy and dignity for as long as possible. So his back was killing him, and a fork fell on the floor, and I'm like, do you want me to pick it up? Or do you want to pick it up? Like, I know it hurts for him to pick it up, but like, his mom and his family were like, oh, we're going to jump in and do it, and just wait for him to like say what he needed. Or I'm like,
Very
okay, but,
infantilizing.
and I'm like, he doesn't like this. A, B, like, it's really hard to experience this next to him and see him in so much pain trying to enjoy Christmas dinner. But like, the last thing he wants is for everything to be on him. on his illness. So let's try to distract. So maybe I got really good at being like, let's put our attention elsewhere. But we're also recognizing that he's really in a lot of pain. And that's a lot to kind of carry every time. So back in the US, I could kind of just, it was tiring, but it was necessary. Could just,
and I think everybody needs a break. I think everybody needs a break. And by going away and re-spooning, refilling your, what did you call it? Refilling your...
Fill up my cup.
Fill your cup, that was it.
Yeah.
I don't want to say bucket because it's kind of rude.
Nope, I fill up my cup.
Filling up your, and because then you're coming back in a better place. And like you say, I've got this kind of now a picture of you guys just sitting, you know, he's not able to eat. How awful for your daughter as well. That's not a Christmas. Whereas you took her and gave her this wonderful family Christmas where she was taken away from all the sadness as well.
Yeah. And that's, I think, partly as much for me as much, and she's like I said, she's clearly kind of has a all the children have, but like has this intuition of something that's happening. So she could just have fun with other kids, have a blast. And then we are coming back, and I knew he'd already been checked into the hospital. I didn't have a lot of information, but I was like, do I come back earlier? He's like, no, don't. And my birthday is January 4th. So my sister and I celebrated our birthday together. And I kind of just was like, I'm just going to laugh and have as much fun as possible. And it's kind of like that run where I knew that bad news was coming. And I was like, I just need to enjoy this as much as possible because I think it's going to be a really, really rough winter. So we get back.
There's something to be said as well for not being afraid of being happy. Like not being afraid to do things that bring you joy, because in that moment there's an element of I must be sad, I must be there for him, I must be supporting, and I think there is no shame and nothing to be not gained from actually finding your own bit of joy, filling your cup.
I think that's like that's some people are like, well, how did you make it? Like, how did you do all this? And like, also you're like, I didn't have, like, what
Put
choice
my head
do you
down
have?
and ran at it.
Like you just, I mean, kind of just dive in. Like you choose if you want to do it or you choose if you want to let it. It's not easy. I'm not saying, but like, I also like, I don't like, yeah, like you said, we're allowed to be happy. Everyone's allowed to be happy. And even my husband was allowed to be happy despite the pain. And if that was his daughter and us doing things, and even if it lasted for 25 minutes before he needed some more of the 15 pain meds he was on, like that was still 15 minutes that was there. So I got back.
He literally gave it all he got, didn't he? That's what I'm really hearing here.
The doctor was like, he's going to die standing. I mean, not physically standing up because he couldn't really anymore, but they're like, he's going to die. Like, it's not like just, he's not giving up. So we got.
What date did he die? Because I do
have
it in my
January
notes.
16th.
Gosh, okay.
So we get back like the 8th, I think, 7th or 8th. And I'm like, okay, we're going to come see you at the hospital. And he's like, I don't feel really great. Come tomorrow. I was like, okay, but tomorrow is like the latest because I haven't seen you for like 10 days. Our daughter hasn't seen you. He was kind of like, I think he'll feel better tomorrow after the meds start working here. Because the team this weekend was like the New Year's team and like it wasn't the A team. So, I'm going to wait for things to get better, which is kind of like his always. And like, but then my friend Margot, so the doctor who's following this whole thing, she's like, okay, I don't know what he's told you, but like things are really bad. Like you didn't need to come back earlier because it was just him sitting around, but like this is like if whether he says to come or not, like you insist on going, you need to talk to the doctor. Like he's in an immense amount of pain and we're not like there's not a solution for this. And so she's a general physician who works in a hospital, but she specializes in geriatrics. So she's used to seeing people at the end of life with chronic diseases. And to follow this for one of her young friends who she's known since high school is really, really hard. But at least with that, I was like, okay, I've been kind of like in this, I wasn't in denial because I knew things were getting bad, but I hadn't had the confirmation of yet how bad they were. So the next day I went and I talked to the doctor and he was, and I saw John and he was still in a lot of pain and like tired, but I didn't bring our daughter right away. I think there was a psychiatrist, a psychologist on staff that I was like, okay, I want to bring her. So I took her to the creche and dropped her off. Then I went to go see him and kind of get the updates on what things were happening. And then brought her in with we went to see the psychologist first, and she explained, she's like, okay, sometimes it can be overwhelming. You see lots of tubes, there's lots of noise, like it's a different space. So we're going to talk to your daughter, and then we'll say like, okay, we're at the hospital. Sometimes it happens because they're sick. So she went through that whole sort of explanation. If you want to go in, you can. If you want to leave the room, it's also okay. You tell us, like, we're not going to force her to stay in the room. She doesn't want to be there. If you want to leave, because there's a great, it's a palliative care place. So there's a family room with toys and like a kitchen. So she could go play with the toys and come back. So I'd talked to the doctor, and he was like, okay, we're getting like, and this doctor he was also younger and had seen my husband for like a year and a half. So I could tell, even for the team taking care of him, they're used to they see young patients sometimes, but a lot of older patients. And you could tell that they even told me like we got to know him, and like he was quite,
they get invested, don't they? You can
charming,
see that how badly they want.
And he's someone that we like really came to appreciate, and like, even with his quirks and whatnot, and like sometimes he'd like have a phone call from work in the middle of a medical meeting, and he'd be like, oh, I gotta get this, I'm gonna take this, and you're like, what the heck, like you're in the middle of a serious meeting about your health, and he's like, I'll be right back
in a minute.
Which he would do that all the time, and it would drive me insane that he would just pick up phone calls in the middle of like conversations. Well, they're calling, and I'm like, well, I'm here. He does to everybody, so it wasn't like, it was just like, okay, so you do it to your doctors too. But it was so I was like, okay, so where are we at? And it was like, okay, we're trying these different pain meds, but like literally they are the pain specialists of France, and they were having trouble trying to find the cocktail of like ketamine, codeine, all of these things that were layered on top of itself to try to get this relief to his back that was just not happening. So it was
and it's just thinking what the body is doing to you when all those pain meds won't work. It's like, Jesus
well, and they were
Christ.
even like, this is honestly like this amount of pain meds, because they were like, well, if we can stabilize it a little bit, then we could potentially go to another hospital that could do more radiation. But even that, they were throwing out that option to him because he needed options. He wanted to know, well, what's my possibilities? What can we do? But even taking him to go get the scan on the other floor of the hospital was so excruciating that he was like sobbing in pain because it was so hard to just do a scan. So taking him to another part of the city was honestly never really an option. But then like every day, so we went with my daughter, and she got to see him, and he was, kind of later afternoons would kind of felt better, and, would eat a little bit. So she came, and the first time she went in, she was kind of like, okay, like saw daddy, kind of saw everything. And she was in there for a few minutes, did like little like bisou from like kiss on the hand. And then she's like, okay, time to go. And like they're like, okay, well, that's like good. She knows she wanted to leave. We let her leave. And then she played for a bit, and she goes, okay, we go back to see daddy. And she was jumping on his bed. She thought it was so fun to go up and down with like the up and down little, like, make the bed go up, make it go down, like, woohoo, it's so good. And you could tell
and he's
that,
like, Jesus.
and you could tell that he was like, afterwards, it was way more like, at that point he was still quite lucid, but you could tell it was like energy, like he got so much out of that. And then she got to see daddy, and so I didn't go. I was supposed to go back to work, and I just called my boss and was like, look, things are not great. I don't know when I'm coming back. We can figure out what my official status is, but like, so the first week I was supposed to work, it just didn't, like, I was just like not there. There's no official place that I was. I was like, I don't really know what's going on with this. We need to do, and then like the following week, so he died on a Tuesday, I believe. And like my boss was like, well, you just go into like, you just basically say you're struggling with emotional depression, whatever, because your husband was sick, off. And it gets signed off as like a sick leave kind of thing.
Now you did rocket through that then. You just went, and then he died on the Tuesday. Now I'm very guilty of doing this myself.
So it just gradually sort of got worse every day. And they were like, well, we can try to do, there was still this sort of option of, well, maybe let's do an epidural that we could just numb the bottom half of his body. And we didn't propose it when we first came in, because when you propose that means that you're not getting up again and you're not leaving, which he wasn't ready to accept or hear, even if that was, and it's not a thing they would typically do for a patient in his situation, because they're usually in their 70s or 80s. But because he was young, and we were hoping to get him just, I guess, as like the 11th, 12th, like Thursday, Friday of the first week we're back, like just the time that he's aware versus when he's sleeping, or just like has the different doses of meds, and you can tell like, okay, we finally found something that works for like a few hours, and you can see his face is relaxed when he's sleeping, but then other times you can tell it's just like tense because he's in pain. So then when he was awake, it wasn't like long periods of discussion. And then we had a lot of people visiting, but it was also, I was like, this, and like the doctor was like, if there's people who want to see him, like they need to come. Like if you have
These are
people abroad who want to see him, come.
really big statements and conversations, these,
Because
aren't
I was
they?
like, okay, like my family lives far away, and I knew that my brother-in-law wanted to come, and my sister would like, they would have preferred to see him, but they're like, no, if people are coming, like tell them to come. So there's other people I reached out to, and so he was getting tired. He's like, I'm not dead yet. Like, why are all these people coming? And I was like, well, you're
Because
not,
you're not
John,
dead
and they
yet.
want to see you. They want to see you. Okay, they just want to see how you're doing. And I mean, we had tons of people coming when he first got sick to the hospital. And it was like COVID, so we had limits, and we like would constantly like why are there 8 people in your room? And there was nice courtyards with like roses who would go out, but it was, so we like constantly like had, at least this time we didn't have COVID problems, but it was more of he would get
But
tired.
you also
And
have to manage their time, don't you? And whilst you want
yeah,
everybody to come and see them, and what's really important is the time he has with you and your daughter now, and it's trying to manage other people's expectations as well and doing the
well,
right thing.
it's like, so there'd be periods of time where like in an hour and a half you'd have like a number of people pass by, and then like later like I would stay, and then my friend that I already spoke of would watch our daughter. Or yeah, I would say later his best friend, like his longtime childhood best friend, Edgar, would, stay with him later, and they'd chat, and it would just be like one person who might stay that late. And like and then his mom came back into town as well. So it was, but then like, yeah, you get a little bit tired, but then people are coming, and like anyone who did come, they're like, thank you for letting me know, and like, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come.
Yeah,
Um, so we decided we'd try the epidural. And for me, it was more like, okay, we're never going to move him to another hospital. Like he's just, but if we can do the epidural and at least numb the pain,
yeah,
maybe we can get a few more days. Like this is what we're bargaining for, of lucidity, that he can chat and spend time with you guys. But we couldn't do it until he was off these blood thinners, which takes 5 days. So it was like, that's where like, well, why don't we just do this from the beginning? Well, he wasn't ready to hear that this was the end yet. And even then I was like, okay, I need passwords to stuff. Like, to have you said you were preparing things. Where is it? Like, so I like literally, he napped one time and I took his thumb and put on his phone and changed his Gmail password so that I could go back in later and then reset everything else. Not what you want to think about when someone's like
no, it's
dying. And
not.
I
It's
was like,
not.
could you do this? And like, I know like you pay all the people in France. Like, I need to let your job know. And he's like, I'll get to it next week. And I was like,
There isn't next week.
but I want to just check now because your boss needs to know. And I'd already talked to his boss, and his boss was like, they knew this point was coming. They're really sad to hear it, but they're like, we already have a game plan. Like, we know that we knew, like, the whole only reason we had this business in Europe is because of him. So we're like, even, and they were great and like just paid him for the whole month and didn't bother changing statutes. They're just like, whatever, like we'll send it directly to you. Like, but so I was like negotiating with him. I'm like, you stubborn jerk. Like, just let me into your stuff. Like, this is the point where we can let it, like, and if we don't need to, then at least it's set up for a later time. But we did the epidural, and it was so it would have been the 16th. And they got it in, placed it, but he was like moving and fidgeting and grabbing at his leg and the catheter, and like clearly not comfortable. And our friends, so Margot, she was like, this is like, it didn't work, something really didn't work, and he's in an immense amount of pain, and this has just made things worse. And that was the 16th. And our daughter, fortunately, we'd gotten to see him a couple more times, but the last time she saw him, I think she sensed that things, like, he was really, it would have been the day before he died. He really didn't have any energy. He like hadn't really eaten the whole weekend besides like a couple M&Ms. Then he just gets so tired that he couldn't eat. And then like, all of us are like, why don't we just give him an IV? And then when the nurses tell you like it's just going to extend like the inevitable, like his body wants to
Oh
die.
God.
If we feed
Yeah.
him, it's just going to like drag it on longer. It's okay if he doesn't eat. And like, you're like, really? Like, this can't this is like the minimum. It's the only thing we have. And at that point, he would kind of say a couple things, but he wasn't, maybe he understood us, but he wasn't really good at expressing things because at that point he had just had so many drugs. And a friend of ours is an anesthesiologist and he came to visit.
You have a lot of friends.
We have an amazing, and I think that's maybe one of the like shining things is just we have an amazing amount of friends here who are really great and helpful people. And he came and when he saw all of the medicine that he's like, ooh, like the fact that he speaks at all and can open his eyes with all of this is actually like quite impressive. But I mean, he saw that and he knew that like we're in a matter of days. But our daughter last time she kind of went in and she kind of just like waved and like kissed from far away, but you could tell she like didn't want to get in the bed and play, and you could tell. And he like it was the end of the day, and then I think I don't know, that's where you could tell it. He wanted so bad to still be there, and he like had a couple of scoops of yogurt, so that was the last thing he ate. But he hadn't eaten anything for like 2 days besides like two M&Ms or something, because that was all we could kind of get him to do, and that was clearly like linked to the fact that he'd just seen her daughter and he wanted to try to be there. But yeah,
He never
the
stopped
epidural.
trying, did he? Never stopped trying.
No, even to the point that I'm like, I kind of wish you had, because we never. I got to say goodbye to him, but he never could really say goodbye to me
Because of the medication.
because of the medication. And then when he still could, like he was still like I had a business trip planned at the end of January. He's like, it's fine, my mom can come. Go, it's fine. Don't cancel it because
So
of me. And
quite deluded.
I'm like, I'm not gonna stay. Like, you're in the hospital. I'm not gonna leave on a business trip. Like, it's just I can't. Like, things aren't great. And like, if you do get better, then I just missed the business trip. There'll be another one. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how
Yeah.
cool the
Nothing
project
else
is.
matters.
This is fine. And so
And
he was still at that point when he was more lucid, and that was where like. So like I basically once we saw that the epidural didn't work and he was still like just super agitated and pain, and they'd proposed like at some point, like we're not there yet, but at some point we're going to ask you, we can sedate him until he dies, but that means you put him to sleep until he naturally dies. And it was a balance because he clearly wanted as much control of what was going on as possible for as long as possible. But at that point I was like, we're doing that, and we know it's going to be like not even 24 hours from now, like. And like that's when I messaged his best friend and I was like, just get here. Um it's
okay.
it's it's really bad. And I was like, it's not whether it's now, whether it's tonight, like we're there. We're at the end. And I messaged another really good friend of mine and she showed up right away, and we just had we just saw like when you see someone die, you can tell when he started coming back, when they came back, like after the epidural, like waking up from that. His breath was just really rickety, and they're like telling you, the nurses, because like this is what they do every day, which again, I'm like, I don't know how you can do this every day. Like, this is like the immense amount of respect that I have for people who do this. And I guess if you're doing it for people who are old and it's their time, like it's less
Yeah.
more peaceful
And
perhaps.
it's about giving them the dignity and the compassion, isn't it? But it must be heartbreaking for them to see him
This young
die and to
person, and
see
then all these
you.
young people coming in to see him, and like to hear this little girl sprinting down the hallway and knowing that it's one of your
Oh,
patients, like, and you're seeing this adorable little girl and you know that her dad is dying, and it's just like awful. They're coming in, they're like, okay, when like this breathing starts to happen, like it's a part of the process of the brain shutting down, because you would have longer and longer gaps in between each breath, and it was just slowly throughout the afternoon. That was what was happening, and it was so I was just kind of waiting with him, and then like I don't know, I think he died at like 6:30, but it was like 5:30, I don't know, and you could just tell like his breath just like there was something shifting, and almost like this his skin just changed, and it almost looked like he was already dead. And it was like, and I was next to him, and his best friend and a number of other friends showed up, and it was you could just hear, and even like we were like, just stop, you could stop, it's okay, we'll be okay, like you could there's plenty of people here to take care of us. And it was still just like, you just stop, this is so awful to watch, like you're in so much pain. And then he passed away. There was a number of us in the room. And then it was, I mean, it's almost surreal because I've been waiting for this moment for in a way for a long time. And it was just, like, it's very, I mean, I hope people don't have to experience it, but like, just to feel like their kind of body, like, just kind of get to this rigid kind of feeling that you can just tell that they're no longer there. And after all of that pain and buildup, it's just like, it's just happened.
God. Yeah.
And I mean, there was a number of really good friends there. I mean, everyone knew it was going to happen, but it was
still a shock though, isn't it?
To kind of witness it, but it's more of just like afterwards, you're like, oh, like, what now? Like, we've got a body. And it's, I mean, it's an obligation to, so like, I mean, I got to stay and like other people got to go and have time with him, but it's very, very sort of measured. They're like, afterwards you have 10 hours in this room. So it would have been to like 4 a.m. that you're allowed to be here. And then we need to like move the body. So they changed and put him into clothes and set him up nicely. And I mean, his best friend, when he got there that afternoon, got all these photos and put them up. Another friend brought a bouquet of mimosas, like the flowers, which is still like weirdly something that I think I'm going to just remember forever. So I think I might just get a tattoo of them because they'd set them in this just vase and they're such a simple, pretty flower. But with like the kind of sterile lighting of the hospital and the yellow of the flowers, it just created this sort of warm glow that was
You definitely should get a tattoo.
present.
Memorial tattoos are
great. Yeah. So I'm trying to think about it, and I need to tell this friend that I'm like, I know you just brought like mimosas are January blooming flower here, and that's just what you got, but they dry up pretty quick. So like to have them beautiful and fuzzy is like very short, but it was the first thing I saw when I lifted my head.
A little bit of joy
my husband's
left,
body
maybe.
was this like vase of like little warm flowers, warm colored flowers of just like kind of a bit of sunshine, and it was abnormally cold and wintry that week, so like 0 degrees, -2, so it was like really real cold winter, and it was just this like beautiful little sort of
glimmer of hope,
glowing
maybe.
light of warmth even in the darkest and coldest of moments.
And the fact that you were able to even identify that, I think, is quite honorable, actually.
I think it came afterwards where I was just kind of like resaw it, and I was like, why does that like keep coming back to me as like a thing that I like? And I'm like, it's because the first thing I saw when I lifted up my head was that vase of flowers, like, which again is small but like significant in moments like that. So it's and then on his coffin we got white roses and mimosas. So it was and I think just a flower that comes in January in the winter when it's cold and you just need some bright sunshine and it's dark, and like just this simple cute yellow flower. So that was,
and we do tend to look for, if you're within the right frame of mind, you will see those little glimmers of positivity, and I think that you've kind of held on to that image, I think, is really nice. And I want to see this tattoo.
I'm trying to find an artist. I've looked it up and I'm like, how do we do it? Because I don't want it to be like too blacky outlined. Because
this is my latest one. That's
nice.
The waff. That's the waff bird.
Like
See?
Yeah.
I branded myself. In fact, one of my guests is coming to near where I live to have the waff bird tattoo as well, Sarah Swainson. So I'm going to try and make you, like, it's a rite of passage. You're going to try and encourage you all to get branded.
Get branded. I have a tattoo that he gave me as a gift that was kind of for our daughter, but it's a tattoo it's on my thigh and a little bit hard to get to, or take off my pants and show you.
I've got one on my thigh. Should we just take our trousers down?
But it's like a geometric one that's like an abstraction of photos that I sent of like our daughter on her first birthday with us. So there's like a little triangle and it's my birthday hat. There's a base, there's a half circle and it's his hat.
I want to see this. You don't have to take your trousers down on camera, but could you send me a picture after?
Yes, I'll send you a photo. I'll send you the photo with the inspiration photos because that's what you'll see. So that was one that he gave as a gift while he was alive. So I'll always have. Mimosas is something that comes, I think, a little bit more. And it's not even just for him. Like it's just like this reminder that there's.
I've actually got I found a card not that long ago, and I had it's got 3 little kisses from Ben. I don't know if you can see it. So that's his handwriting on my wrist. Nice. So just 3 little kisses. Now, Kassie, I really could genuinely talk to you all day.
As I say, we're going to hit.
But unfortunately, I have got a commitment. I have to go and pick my son up from school today. So I am going to have to call this call time. But honestly, I could listen to you for another 2 hours. You're fascinating. And you've got so much of a story. And you sort of hinted that, well, actually, we spoke at the beginning. I was like, goodness, 5 months in. And I said to you, perhaps you come back again in a year, because I'd love to see what your life looks like in a year. So I think if you're happy to do that, we'll stay in touch, because I think to see that you're very, without trying to sound patronising, you're kind of mature in your grief, because at 5 months, I was still very much in the chicken and wine phase. I was still drinking gin and vin. And I think that you sound very mature and very together. And I don't know whether that's just who you are or if it's the support you've got around you, but I think that you're going to be all right. I think you guys are going to be all right. And I really would love to check back in with you and see what mountains you've climbed and what adventures you've had, because I feel like that little girl's in really good hands over there. And it's nice to hear, because you're doing, we're all doing the best we can with our kids, as, those of us who have kids. And I know what a tough journey this is, and I think that you're incredible to be able to come and tell your story to me. Within the first 6 months of losing John, I'm very honoured that you did, and I think that you are going to help a lot of people. So thank you, thank you for coming on, and
thank you for creating the opportunity. I think this podcast is. I listened to several that I just was like wanted to slap the people in the face, but I think this one was very real and very. That's why I reached out and.
Good, because face slapping. Well,
No, I don't. I was more laughing because the people were quite honest, and like there's things that you want to say that people don't are like no, just everything's on the table. People feel the way they feel.
This is quite raw, I think, and I think there is at the risk of sounding like a bit of a prat, there is a space here where you can say the good, the bad, the ugly, and I think we all need that, because nobody within this arena is going to judge you. Like, you can't shock me. You can try, and anybody on the periphery, if anybody was to say anything mean, they just get taken down. Like you don't touch my widows.
No, and I think there's some also just very practical things sometimes about like what I still haven't figured out. Like I wear my wedding ring every day. I don't know when that's
I lost mine in the Turkish Sea, so that dealt with that problem. Yeah,
that's
at Easter. I know, right? I know. So I'm still pretty gutted about it, but I'm dark humor gets you
nonetheless, that is a question that gets asked. But so to have a community where that can be a thing that's not weird or makes people uncomfortable.
I had mine remodeled and with them on the other hand, actually, because obviously I've remarried, so it was a bit awkward. But I create this beautiful piece of jewelry, and I loved it so much, and I think that's one of the reasons I was so gutted. But anyway, we live in them.
Yeah.
But
all right,
thank you.
Be very happy to come back on and sort of see.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to kind of see your trajectory and see what happens, because I think it will be fascinating. Now, for anybody listening out there that has been affected by Kassie's story today, you can reach out to me. I can pass on messages directly to Kassie, or you can just, let us know how you feel about it. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Kassie, for joining me. And everybody out there, you take care of yourselves. Until next time, thank you. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode helpful, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you think someone else may benefit from this, please do share. We'd also really appreciate a quick review. It helps more people find the show. Thank you again, and see you next time on Widowed AF.